Hey there, friends. It's Carpo here. It's like May 12th, 2021. It's a beautiful day. I always love to lead with that statement if it is a beautiful day. It's supposed to get up into the 70s, 80s. But on top of the visible weather and the weather that we can see and that we can, you know, are directly affected physically by, as far as the rain and the cold and the heat, there's also space weather, and space weather is often overlooked as being as the way it affects us as humans. So, since I didn't really plan out how I was going to talk about this, I suppose I should just start with a little preamble of what I mean. There's been a lot of debate in the scientific community over, well, forever, regarding whether or not solar activity, such as solar minimums or maximums or geomagnetic storms, affect the human psyche. And entwined with this is astrology and the idea that we are influenced by the stars. In fact, influenza, as we know as the flu, that term comes from the word influence, because they believed that disease was caused by the influence of the stars and the planetary bodies and their motions. They may have not been too far off. In fact, studies that have been done on all of the outbreaks and, major epidemics over as far as we could study had coincided with times with either solar minimum or maximum. There's still a lot of evidence lacking as to how we can prove these things or what the correlation is. There were some crazy theories about the way that the magnetism of the earth affects our minds and our bodies and how it might affect animals as well. But not to get into that part because that's too much sciencey stuff for this the purpose of this video. There's something called the Schumann resonance. Now, the earth vibrates at a certain resonance or frequency, if you will. Now, this is known, on average, they say it's about 7.83 hertz, which is lower than human hearing, obviously. It's a very slow rumble. The earth seems to vibrate at this rate, and it's caused by all of the lightning strikes around the earth, which I believe there's 50 per second is what they say, which actually seems kind of low, but this varies, of course, by area, and but this is a worldwide average. About 50 lightning strikes per second, and these cause the earth to vibrate at a certain frequency, which coincidentally and interestingly seems to coincide with certain brain waves and brain patterns that humans have in the 6 to 16 hertz range, right? And let's just say, for the sake of this discussion, I can't really bring up all the scientific articles. You can look them up if you're interested. But it seems that human brain activity does somehow correlate to magnetism on the Earth, which I don't know why that would be so surprising. Animals, there's theories that beached whales, often it's caused by issues in the magnetic field of the Earth, as well as migration interruptions, things like this, which are caused by magnetic disturbances, which we can definitely, as humans, create with our technology as well. But these natural disturbances, let's say the CME, coronal mass ejection, the impact to the Earth is what causes people to see aurora borealis all the way down to the equator, something we haven't seen in our modern day, but something that was visible in 1859 during the Carrington event, which was a major solar storm where people saw all the way down south auroras in the sky, but it also blew out telegraph lines and caught some stations on fire. If something like this were to come today, when we have a full grid system, it would be devastating. But that's just the cost, the financial, and the impact on our infrastructure, which is completely different than the effects on our brains as individuals. Now, what led me to this, bring this discussion up now, is I got up this morning and I felt pretty motivated. I felt pretty good. And I don't know, sometimes when it's not just feeling good or motivated. There's something else inside me that sometimes I just feel like there's a little extra push, a little more on top of my game. And so I looked up to see if there was a solar storm, and sure enough, we're in, I think, I can't remember if it's a G3 or what, but we are in the middle of geomagnetic storm right now, because there was a CME a couple days ago. And interestingly enough, this is not the first time or even the second or third time, but one of at least a dozen times when this has happened to me. It's the same way as some nights when I'm up till 2 in the morning and I can't figure out why I can't get to sleep. I'll say, it must be a full moon, and walk outside. Sure enough, almost every time it's a full moon. Now people could say that this is correlation, not causation, that this is just by chance, and that's kind of the mentality I've tried to entertain, those notions that it might be all by chance for most of my life. But now with the new scientific research that's coming out regarding brainwaves and how we are affected by the Earth, it's a totally different story. Our brains have many different states, and we have the alpha state, and then there's I think there's the beta, and there's all these different studies into the brain waves, and how when we're in certain states of mind, our brains actually are putting out a very small external amount of, I guess, waves. I guess, what would it be? Energy? I'm not sure exactly how to identify and define that, but that indeed we are not only affected by our physical environment, but by these unseen forces as well. Just like when you walk past a meltdown, a radioactive, site, a hugely contaminated area. You might walk through that spot, not even know it. You can't feel the radiation unless it's heavy enough. It will burn your skin, but let's just say a mild dose of radiation, you might have no clue you're walking through it, but it's affecting your body regardless of whether you know it or not. In fact, it wasn't, some interesting stories about how, radiation was discovered in rocks, and somebody put some rocks in one of their drawers in their desk, a scientist, and then when he pulled out some slides of film in the drawer above it, they had been exposed. So he realized, even though they hadn't been exposed to the sunlight, there must have been some force or energy that had changed and affected those negatives. It was pretty interesting. So, at any rate, we don't know. We're in the infancy of discovering these things, but it really does lead one to look back through time and say, well, maybe the ancestors knew a little more than we thought. The same kind of, reality check comes when you find that we're moving into the world of medicine and getting away from all of those old herbs, all these old folk medicines. And then you start finding out that a lot of the new medicines are coming from these folk medicines. If there's a profit to be made and you pretend like it's not a natural substance, though, that's how people think. But in reality, these things have been passed down for generations, these ideas. And I'm sure that there is something to astrology. But no, I don't believe in modern astrology or reading someone's charts. I took astrology back to its roots and tried to find where it originated from, and there's a brick wall there. There's really nothing to show that it's truly ancient knowledge, at least in the modern sense. And I'm fascinated with the brain and how it's affected, because imagine if you could, I don't know, I guess part of me would want to know, okay, what kind of a day is today as far as geomagnetic storms, and plan your day around that somewhat like you do weather. But I kind of feel like that's you're setting yourself up. To compare it to psychics, I think is perfect. People say, well, if you could go to a psychic and they'd tell you your future, would you want to know it? Honestly, I don't, and I wouldn't. I would never want to know my date of death, because then you base your life around what you think you know. Whereas if you're the same thing as if you assume that it's going to be rainy one day, you might not make any plans to go camping, and then you find out it was a beautiful weekend and they were wrong. So, at any rate, let me know what you think about the way that these, if you know any studies, or if you've had any experiences with being affected by, geomagnetism, solar storms, or the moon, or even the movement of the other planets. We'll find out eventually, I would imagine. Or maybe not. At any rate, I'm getting ready to go finish making some herbal butter. So I'm out. Thanks for coming along. Say bye, Lucy. Say bye. Peace.